All right, guys, if you can just have your attention for part of things and the exercise assistance. Oh, okay. All right, so as I said, we'd give you the rest of today to just complete those activities as well. Friday, we would have done the same thing, but seeing as, are you guys coming in tomorrow? Is there a lecture tomorrow? No, the answer is no. So you do not need to come in. So we are giving you today as the chill day to kind of just complete anything that you're working on. I'm realistically only going to take like about the first hour or so just to go through your assignment, give you some assistance with the exercises, and then do a bit of revision. Now, with regards to your test, that is on Monday. I think you guys are ready for that in terms of what you've learned. All of you have been able to make your way through your logo exercises without asking for much assistance, which is good. And everything's looking good as well. I've been walking around and seeing what you've done. Now, because, okay, so you guys wrote InDesign a couple of weeks ago. You had a theory part of things, and then you also had a practical side of things. Now, that's going to basically be the same for Illustrator, and you're going to have a practical where we that you will need. So we'll also, or I'll provide you a bit of a scope just now as well on areas to focus on. The difference between this test and test not open. So InDesign was open book. We gave you the chance notes as it was your first test, but now moving forward, you're not going to be open as we say so. So Illustrator is means you're not going to of any kind on your, you will actually have to go and start for this. Go through some, really done a lot. You guys scope on what when it comes to your studying, but it's not open book. So please make sure you take time to put the notes with that. But as usual, if you guys are comfortable with your exercises, you should be more than ready to do that test. You guys saw that we practice. It wasn't as difficult that you probably thought it was going to be, design and layout. So that's, I think everyone more than passing and doing that test with that. So I'm going to start off with a bit of the exercise side of go as 3D aspect of it with your rocket was something that we did on 3D. But the two I want to go over is your circles logo. For some reason, I want that logo, but Mercedes, yeah, that's fine in blank. But yeah, I'm going to do the set of circles with you, and I'm going to do the Mercedes. Now, I'll start with the Mercedes because those of you who managed to do this, how did you create, not the shape, shadows and such? Drop shadows and gradients. So you mean the entire kind of strong line that gotcha, you did that with a gradient. Okay, how long did that take you? Okay, a few minutes. Now, with the gradients, I'm assuming we maybe needed to be a little bit picky as to where those colors were going so that it ended up with a straight line. Now, what you want to use for that, you could try gradient if that was something that gave you the result. However, an easier option to make this into a 3D object. So if you go into extrude and bevel, not any of the other options, just the extrude, what you're going to get, of course, is a 3D shape. Now here, there's two things that you need to set. The rotation. So the first one I want to do, you have it to try and fight with this to make sure it's face drop, face it to the front. That's That's step number one. So you apply your extrude 3D option to your star. Then in your rotation, you set that to the front. And then the last thing you do in order to get those points in the center and to give it that cut shape, just add in a bevel. Now, a bevel will take your design and it will give you the shadows that you need. You might need to play around a little bit with the settings, but that's it. It took me all of like a minute or two just to create those lines and those shadows. So it's a flat star. We apply the extrude the 3D option to it. I saw a few of us trying to recreate it with separate triangles. That was definitely not the easiest way to go about doing it. You're going to have to remember to group those. But extrude, the first thing you're going to want to do is set your rotation at the bottom to the front. Instead of trying to rotate that yourself, bring it to the front. And then lastly, in the bevel area, we're going to turn this on. You'll keep the shape as is. You don't need to change any of the styles. And then the only setting you're going to want to adjust here is the width, so that it's not on the outer edge, but rather meeting at a point in the center. And that's how you're going to get Mercedes logo. Okay, one shape with a 3D effect applied. So if you want to go ahead and try that out, you can before I go on to the circles. To everybody. So if you were going the other route of multiple shapes and then applying gradients or adjusting a solid color for each, yes, while that is something you can do, you may struggle a bit to make sure that everything is aligned correctly and everything is in proportion and angled. Whereas this way, it's going to evenly distribute that bevel and those shadows as well. Now, the next one is going to be your set of circles. Now, this requires basically two techniques, Pathfinder, and that's it. You need to then make duplicates. What may give you an issue here is trying to keep everything aligned. Now, how you would start this, and I've just set this up on my end, is you would start with your 3 circles. Okay, so depending on how you guys started the shape, you would start with 3 basic circles, like so. And you would then go and start overlapping them so that you get your overlapping sections. That is how you will start with this particular exercise. 3 circles, and they are overlapping in some way. Okay, they have some amount of that overlapping. So that's your starting for this row of circles. 3 individuals and then overlap. Next thing that I need to do here is to make the cut out lines over each of these circles. It is not a solid white shape. It is literally being cut out so that we can actually see the spaces behind that. Now, before I go and make these horizontal cuts, we need to also think about the solid shape that's in the overlap areas. That needs to be done separately. not at the same time as making these horizontal cuts. So what you would typically do is, or you, however, you keep a duplicate of your original circles so that when it comes to the next step, you have pieces that you can only get the overlapping areas from. So what layers look like, yeah, and I'm going to delete these as well. In my layers panel, I have two sets. I have a main layer with each individual circle, and each individual circle has its own set of rectangles that are going across. And I've made sure to also group them to the relevant circle. So I'm just going to unhide these. Each one looks like this. It's a circle with a set of rectangle shapes going across. I'm choosing to set this up first so that when I go and cut those out, everything is aligned. I'm not going to try and do this on an individual process. I set them all up first so that everything remains aligned. Now, the next thing I'd want to do, like I said, is keep a duplicate of those same circles in my layers, because you are going to need a second set to create these overlapping pieces. You are not custom making these pieces. We are going to be using Pathfinder for that as well. Now I've got a duplicate here that's directly on top. I'm just choosing to hide it, mainly because I don't want to have the trouble of trying to align it later on by moving that. But however you guys want to keep those duplicates, that is your preference. But your starting point is to get 3 circles, and for each of them, have a set of rectangles running along. That's what we're going to use to then cut out those rectangles. So I've got 3 groups here. One of them is a circle, and each of them have their own set of rectangles. Now that I've got those groups and they are aligned, I can select my first group with my circle and my rectangles, and then I'll use my Pathfinder subtract. That is going to take that set of rectangles and cut it out of the blue. I'll then select my next pink circle with its set of rectangles, Pathfinder, subtract. I'm doing all of this so that it stays in line. If there's even a slight movement of the shapes, it'll be very obvious when things aren't aligned, even when there's just a slight amount of an adjustment. So that's why before I went and pathfinded, I make sure that all of my things are next to each other in the good alignment that I need them to be at. So I don't do my circles one at a time. I do all 3 of them to set them up, and then I go and pathfinder. So now I have 3 sets of circles, each with their own individual cuts within it. In my layers panel, this is what my layers look like. Each of them is split up into individual shapes. So that's how you start your first set, which is just getting the lines to be running horizontally and equally throughout all the shapes. You're not using one set of rectangles for the whole thing. You're using 3 sets, 1 for each circle. Okay, does that part make sense? So I want you to try that out, even if you want to try it with 1 circle or 2, just to get your rectangles in place, and then we'll go through this little section underneath. wanted to, that's fine. So I've kind of got this up here in stages, each circle with its own set of rectangles. And then per circle, you'll select that circle with the rectangles, Pathfinder, and then subtract. And that's going to give you your base. Now, as for the spaces or for the solid shapes in between, how would we get that shape? For those of you who did manage to do that. Did we make that custom, like draw it out? Okay, so we did. And was it easy to shape and align? Not really. Now, another thing that you could have tried to do was perhaps 2 circles. Always, everything in this design relies on circles and just a little bit of rectangles. But 2 circles, and you could have again pathfinded this, but to only keep the overlapping area. That's how you would have gotten the shape. However, the way I went about doing that is wrong because now I've got the shape. When I come into this design, I am going to have to spend the time aligning and sizing, and it might not fit as perfectly and uniform as what it looks like in the logo exercise, which is why I needed a duplicate of my circles in the exact same position before I made the cuts. So that when I do keep these overlapping areas to get that sort of, I don't know, what would you even call that shape? To get that sort of lemon-looking shape or diamond with just 2 edges, we want to keep them in the same area so that I'm not needing to move it, scale it, and resize it thereafter. Or an almond, yes, you call that an almond. So I've got that duplicate directly on top. So my first set is now with all my cutouts. Now I've got my duplicate set right at the top. And what I need to do is not make horizontal cuts, but I actually need to keep just this middle part for each side. Now, if we do this using Pathfinder, like so, I'm going to get the one side, but now I need the next, but I don't have a circle for that. So if I try doing all 3 of them at the same time, and I use intersect because that's going to keep the parts that are overlapping, it only works with 2 parts. So this is where we need to be a little bit curious as to what your other options do for you in Pathfinder. So these were our basics. But as you can see, I actually need 2 cutouts from 3 shapes, not 1. So your basic 4 is not going to help you there. What you're going to want to use is one of your other Pathfinder options. And the one you're going to use is your first area. It's called divide. What this does is it allows you to work with 3 shapes that are overlapping. And when I click on divide, nothing visual is going to happen. However, if I were to now double click into this, I will be able to separate each of these pieces and only retain those middle 2 that I needed. Whereas intersect, you could only get one side at a time. If you choose divide, you get both. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. Let me just undo that. Pathfinder, if I'm using one of my basic options, it's not going to work because it can't use 3 shapes. It needs 2. I need to use another Pathfinder option that is literally going to split up every single part of this. So it's going to split up this side of the circle. It's going to split up the overlapping area. Every piece is going to basically become its own shape. And that has to be done using divide. Divide, when I click on it, nothing is going to disappear. This does not cut something out of another shape. All it does is it recognizes where the shapes are overlapping and it cuts around that area. So I'm able to then delete the spaces or the shapes that I don't need and keep the ones that I do. That is the purpose of divide. And then after, it's just a matter of arranging that within your layers, like so. Right, I'll need to arrange that on my end. So I need to do that pink and so on. But yeah, so that is how you're going to get those middle pieces instead of doing them individually so that they remain accurate and in line. You're going to use the divide. So try it out. When you use divide, it's not going to immediately look like anything's changed. You're going to have to go and select the pieces to then get rid of them. Using the divide option, it does group all of those pieces together. So if you want to just make it a bit easier for you, after you click on divide, you can then go and ungroup that. So object ungroup, and then you'll be able to separate those pieces without needing to double click into it. All right, and that was just the two that I wanted to demonstrate for you guys. Other than that, I think you guys got the rest of that, so we can continue. Any questions about this? All right, let's chat a little bit about your revision side of things, and then we'll look at your assignment for this. Now, same concept or same drill as last time. When you guys are coming in for your test next week, Monday, make sure you're bringing in your rulers and your pencils and so on, because you'll be running a similar system of measuring to get page sizing and so on. The only thing you're not going to need to worry about, of course, is working with multiple pages, because that is InDesign. Before I get started with revision, do you guys have any questions for me with regards to anything that we've covered over the past 2 weeks? Anything with regards to exercises, an area that you struggled with and you'd like me to go over again? The chopsticks, so which parts of that? Just making them with a pattern. Okay. All right, so the revolve concept, that's what we learned there, and the pattern. All right, so not the chopsticks in particular, just the concept of it. Okay, so that, anything else? The the swirl, so around the rocket, I'm assuming. Okay, so the revolve option for 3D, the swirl, and what else? Just those two. All right, so all right. So the concept there was revolve. to get a cylinder shape, something that we could perhaps hold. And then the next piece was to add in the swirl around that. So what I'm going to do, because that is technically the same technique that you need for your rocket, I'm just going to create this piece with you guys. Now, I'm not going to do it exactly how this needs to be. You guys will go and fine tune that, but I'm going to run through those concepts again. So the first thing we need to identify here is, of course, what type of shape do I need to start with? Looking at just the body of the rocket, not the fire, not the outside or the window, just the body. That needs to be a custom shape. It's got a triangle head and then it's got almost like a tapered body for the rest of the rocket. So I need to make that shape starting off. Now, because revolve is what I need to use here, it's not a flat 3D shape with one side inflated. It's a fully cylindrical 3D piece. So we need to use revolve. I'm going to start by making the main shape, which is to create that rocket body. So I'm just going to kind of do this very roughly. Start off with the triangle for the head. Wrong tool entirely. Okay, like so. Then perhaps I will start with the body thereafter. And that's more or less going to be the body of the rocket. Now, of course, I need to maybe do some rounding to this, so I can do that as well to the triangle. And yeah, so you guys would take your time just making the shape that's needed for this, depending on what it is you need to create. Now, the shape of this does determine the final outcome of the actual extrude or the revolve option. So make sure that you've got the initial shape done. So if I need a bottom piece that's kind of tapered at the end, I'm going to take the time on my shape to pull in those anchors and make that adjustment. Like so. So something along these lines. That's going to be the body of my rocket. So these are two separate shapes still. And all I did was at the bottom of this, I pulled the two sides a bit closer, and that's going to give me that tapered edge. Okay. Now, when we apply our 3D piece to this, because you want to use revolve, remember, specifically with the revolve option, you need to work with half of the shape. So two separate shapes currently. One is a triangle, the other started as a rectangle. And what I did to bring the bottom two pieces closer was I swapped over to my direct selection tool, white arrow, and then I went onto that anchor point in that corner and I physically pulled that a little bit more towards the middle of the shape at the end. That's how I got that sort of tapered edge. So a rectangle, and then I'm actually taking the anchor and I'm pulling that closer to each other. That's how I'm getting the bottom. You need to deselect your shape first and then select the anchor point. Again, if you guys are using direct selection tool, you mustn't have the shape selected first and then swap over to the white arrow, because then it just selects all the corners. Okay, now once you've got that edge, moving on, the next thing we need to do, specifically because we are working with 3D, we cannot apply a uniform 3D to two separate shapes. We need to combine them. So I am going to go and select both of those pieces. I'm going to Pathfinder, and then I'm going to join those two together. So specifically for 3D, like your revolve, we cannot do a uniform revolve around two separate pieces. So I select triangle and the body, and then I pathfinder those together. So I'm making duplicates along the way so that you guys can kind of see the stages that we are going with. So two separate shapes, and now one. Now the next step here would be to go and apply the revolve. If I go and apply this, you guys don't need to do this yet, but if I go and apply that revolve option, is that giving me the results that I need? It's looking kind of like an urn in my case. That's what it's looking like. And if I change that direct sort of offset, I'm still not going to get the results that I need, specifically with revolve. So anytime you want to use the revolve option so that I don't get this vase looking shape, I need to get the rocket body. You work with half of the design. So we made the full shape of the body. Now, but again, before I apply revolve, I need to split this directly down the middle. You can use your scissors tool if you want to cut this in half. You can do another pathfinder for this if you want. And that's just going to be me creating a rectangle over half of the shape, like so. And then using pathfinder, subtract to get half of it. So specifically for revolve, after you've made the full body of the shape, you then need to cut it directly down the middle in half, typically vertically and not a horizontal cut. So I'm doing one long vertical cut straight down the middle. Once you've got that in half, then you can go into your 3D and materials and apply the revolve. It is still going to give you a cylinder. That's how it's always going to start. You must then remember to change the direction from left to right. And that's going to swap you over to the proper shape that you are working with. So I had my shape in half. This is my next stage. Then I apply a revolve, change offset to right. And that's then going to revolve that around each other. So you must start with half specifically for revolve. So you're like a little Minecraft person or Roblox. Yeah. Okay. Let's join these together first. Just those two shapes. All right, so revolve has to work with half of the shape. So typically, you make the full shape and then you cut it in half, usually always a vertical cut, never a horizontal. Now that I've got my shape, any color that it comes from is coming from the outline itself. So mine's currently black. If I change that to white or even a yellow shade, then I'm going to see that color. But all of its appearance comes from the stroke setting. So I wouldn't even bother with adjusting fill options. So that has now gotten me my revolved rocket. If I show you how the revolve is working, it's starting from the flat shape, and as it rotates, it makes a full 360 copy right back until the original face. And that's what gives you a revolve and the cylinder shape to this, almost like a perfectly rounded element. Okay, so half the shape, revolve, and then you usually always need to adjust the direction. Any questions about that step to repeat? Okay, so now that you've got that, the next thing to tackle is the pattern. Now your pattern, specifically for the rocket, is a set of lines, just like how we did the chopsticks. But the way you add the pattern to your swatches matter. So how or what direction should I create this pattern at? It's going to be a set of rectangles alternating between red and orange. What direction should this be created at? Should it be horizontal? Let me change that color. Or should I be creating that vertically? Like so. You need to create it horizontally. Remember, when you create a pattern for 3D and you add it to the swatches specifically for 3D, when you place it on that object, it's going to reverse the direction. It's going to go the opposite. So if I need a set of swirls running down vertically, the pattern I create actually has to be done horizontally. So when it's added to the 3D object, it flips that and it rotates that to a vertical pattern instead. So I'm going to create this with my rectangles, and I'm not going to use the same color scheme, like so. And all I'm doing is I'm just creating the set of them. All right, so that's going to be my horizontal. Now, after I've created the repeat, again, I'm not going to create how many times it repeats. The software will do that for me. I'm just creating the edges that I'm going to need. Now, once I've got that sorted out, I can take this, and as you would a pattern, I'm going to drop that into the swatches. Click and drag straight into the swatches. And this is what you should have. A horizontal pattern with your alternating rectangle colors. And once it's added into your swatches, you are going to apply that to wherever the main color is coming from. So in this case, it is coming from my stroke. So on the stroke, I'm going to apply my rectangle pattern. And as you can see, the lines are going down vertically. Even though the pattern we created was done horizontally, when it places itself on the revolve object, it will rotate that to vertical instead. It's not going to twist yet. We still need to go and sort that out. After your pattern is applied, I'm just going to change some colors here. Okay. After your pattern is applied, to get the twist effect, you are not doing anything in the 3D settings, as that is going to change the object. we need to physically or only isolate and rotate the pattern that's inside it. So any type of rotation to the, should I say, pattern on a 3D object isn't done in 3D and materials. It needs to be done in specifically the rotate tool. So I'm going to select my 3D object. I'm going to double click on the rotate tool. And inside of this, I need to tell it what it is that I want this rotation to affect. And I only want it to rotate the pattern. Therefore, I'm going to uncheck the transform object because I don't want it to touch the 3D rocket that I've made. I only want it to rotate the pattern. So with pattern checked on, as I increase this rotation, you'll see that your swirl is going to start basically swirling around that. So instead of straight lines, it's going to rotate just the pattern along the 3D element to give you that swirl effect. If I wanted more lines, then my pattern would have needed to be made with more lines. Right now, I only have 3. Be careful how much you are rotating it as well. At some point, you may see a little bit of a cut from where that's wrapping around. Okay, so anything pattern-wise to a 3D object, when it comes to rotating for a swirl, needs to be done in the rotation tool. If you want to make your pattern smaller, instead of being so large across the shape itself, again, that's also something that has to be done using a specific tool that only accesses the pattern. So just like how we used rotate to create the swirl, if I wanted to make the swirls a bit smaller and allow for more repeats, you can use the scale tool. So if I double click the scale tool next to rotation, this is just an extra for you guys. But if I double click on that, just like rotate, I'm going to get the option to only affect the pattern. So I'm going to make sure I'm doing that, only the pattern. And through here, your value should be 100%. If I set this to like 50, for example, I'm basically making my pattern smaller and therefore allowing for more repeats to happen. So instead of a single swirl or a single blue swirl that I had initially, not 10, like so, if I wanted more of those lines, I made the pattern smaller, therefore allowing for more repeats. This has to be done using scale. So rotate was for the purpose of making straight lines swirl. Scale is for the purpose of taking this from 100. Let's say I bring this down to 10. I'm using uniform, making sure that only patterns is checked on. When I adjust this, I get more repeats this way. And this way, I don't need to go and remake the pattern with more lines. I don't need to go and edit the pattern. Simply by scaling it to a smaller size than what it is, will basically allow for more room, therefore more repeats of those lines. You need to be combined together first.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, but select these separately. So they're not. I don't think they're overlapping a little bit. Okay. Here we go. And so if I could select those separately, the subtract wasn't gonna work. Then we select both. All right, cool. So I hope you guys have made a note of that. That is something worth practicing, because so as far as revision goes, you guys need to make sure you know the basics. As far as making colors, you need to know how to work with text, how to work with basic shapes and gradients. So if you guys want to make notes of this, you can. Those are some areas that you're going to want to focus on. All right, so starting off, you need to make sure you set up your document correctly. Judging from the last test, there were a couple of instances where the document units were set at points. That's wrong. So you need to make sure you are setting up your document correctly. From page size to units to even adding in the lead as well. Those need to be done correctly. Make sure your color mode is right. Everything we do is for print in this case, so it needs to be CMYK. So document setup needs to be done correctly. If there's anything you need to focus on, make sure you are comfortable with creating 3D elements using something like Revolve and patterns. If you can redo your rocket logo a couple of times until you get comfortable with it, you will be fine for that element. Make sure you know how to work with gradients and text. Okay, paragraphs of text, single lines of text, things you guys are already familiar with. Text wrap as well, you're going to want to be familiar with that. Okay, text wrap, so we did that in Pine Summit, where the text needed to flow around the shape. Make sure you're familiar with creating swatches, saving them, and the basic stuff like layers, organizing layers, making use of things like styles for character or paragraph. Okay. There are going to be instances where, as usual, if something isn't provided, you're going to have to create it yourself. So keep that in mind. So that's what I mean by make sure you understand the basics of shapes, how to use things like Pathfinder as well. These can either be a practical or could be a theory. Certain elements that you may need can be found in the symbols palette. Now, we looked at symbols very briefly when we were creating our house, but the symbols palette can give you a range of pre-made elements. Now, it doesn't look like, well, there isn't anything in this, but if you click on the library icon in the symbols panel, you will be able to access a range of different categories. So depending on what icons or elements that you need, for example, web icons, I'm just giving you random things. If you need icons like this that aren't provided, the symbols palette is where you will go to look for that. Creating symbols or using them in your design, anything that you need from this, click, drag, and drop it onto your page. That's how you use it. If you need to make any sort of color change to this, it is its own special group. So you would need to double click on this. It's going to tell you you are editing symbols. That's fine. You're going to say okay. And then you will be free to change the color of this to whatever you basically need to adjust this for. So some elements you can find in the symbols palette. So I do suggest just making sure you are familiar with the fact of going to the library icon and being able to browse any of these categories to look for an icon that you may need. Okay, another hint as well. So anything that you need from here, click on it, drag and drop. If you need to edit, double click, say okay to any pop-up that comes up, make your change, and then double click out of it to save it. That is how your symbols panel works. So there's a wide range of pre-made graphics. I suggest that when you guys are doing your practical component, after you've looked at it, and if there's some symbols or if there's some icons there that you feel like you might not be able to do, look for it in the symbols panel. See if you can find it in there first. And if you can't, then you will need to make that. But you are definitely going to be needing to come to you for your test. So symbols for pre-made graphics. If you need any border elements, any border design that is asked for you to create, you can find that in your brushes panel. So window menu, brushes, and just like symbols, you have a library icon that gives you a range of different outline options. Right, all of these are library elements. So you essentially will just be looking for what it is you need exactly from here. Okay, so you have a wide range of different border designs depending on what you need. All right, so that is kind of the two areas that I'm insisting that you're going to want to kind of look at and just make sure you are familiar with finding things. So even something as simple as a dotted border, for example, can be found through the brushes panel in a certain library, and it'll do the repeats for you. So in certain cases, you're going to need to go into symbols and you might need to go into brushes. I'm showing you this because we haven't made custom brushes. That is a little bit advanced, but you are able to access the free options from the brushes panel. And brushes, that's going to give you pre-made graphics, and the other is going to give you border elements. So those are going to be one of your two main areas that you're going to either be going to for something. So brushes and symbols. So this could either be a practical or could be a theory question, one of the other. So everything that I've told you is for practical senses like document setup, bleed, and so on, but you could also be asked a couple of theory questions. So let's look at a bit of a general side of things. Now, I'm going to do this first and then send you guys out to break. When it comes to a document, right? This page that I'm on, what is that referred to as? It's an artboard. So it's not a page, it's not a canvas, it's an artboard. What is the area around it called? Huh? Pardon? Gray space, empty space. That's what it is, but what's the term? Not padding. Hey, not padding. It's referred to as a paste board. Okay? So the empty space, it is empty space, but that gray area around it is referred to as a paste board. Now, what does the paste board allow you to do? What can I do in a paste board? I can create more artboards. So you have all of this room to add in more pages. So make notes of these as I'm going through this. Pasteboard allows you to add things in like more artboards for more areas for creation. Pasteboard allows more artboards, and it also allows you to store graphics on the side that you may not need currently. So if I'm doing a full layout design and I keep a range of graphics off my artboard, I can kind of store them there in case I want to use them later on without needing to remake it or re-add it to the design. So those are two things that a pasteboard does. It allows for you to create more artboards, and it allows you to store graphics and elements. That's what it allows you to do. So those are two uses of a paste board. Okay. Make sure you guys are familiar with packaging and exporting. Please do that correctly this time. Remember your crop marks and your bleed marks for your PDFs. Package correctly so that all your images and fonts are coming across. And yeah, make sure you're familiar with how to use things like an appearance palette as well. Two, appearance. So appearance palette as in adding multiple fills and strokes. So your appearance palette will show you all appearance settings for your shapes. So if you need to find an effect that you applied, for example, I'm just going to default this. Let's say I add a drop shadow to this. Drop shadow. Okay. Any type of special effect that you apply to a shape, appearance palette will give you that effect for you to be able to click on it and edit it. Effects in Illustrator. Once it's applied to a shape and you need to edit, don't go back to the effect menu and back to drop shadow. This will not open up what's currently added. It will just add another drop shadow. So you'll basically be adding multiple as you are going. If you need to simply edit the existing effect, you're going to find it in appearance setting. So there are two places that show you the appearance areas of a shape: properties panel and appearance panel. Make sure you know those two. So if you add a effect like a drop shadow or anything from the effects menu, the two areas that you can go to access that effect and edit it is either the properties panel, and if not the properties panel, then the appearance panel will give you access to that effect. So let's note those two down. Properties and appearance panel will give you information about effects added onto a shape that you can go and edit. Okay. Now, here's a question. If I want to figure out the width and height of a shape. Okay, I want to see what was the width and height that I created for the square. Where am I going to go to get that information? That's not the properties panel, not margins. So I need the actual size of the shape. Where am I going to go? That's not the properties panel. That will tell me information like the width and height of a shape. Information like the rotation angle that it's currently at. Any idea? Okay, so anytime a question asks you where to go to look for certain things, look and see what it's asking for. Is it asking for finding effects and fill colors? Then that's appearance. If it's asking for actual values like a width and height or a rotation angle, then it's looking or it's asking for the transform panel. Transform is going to give you actual numerical information about that shape. It won't tell you anything about colors and effects. This is telling you the properties of the shape, the actual size, and even if there was a rotation angle as well. So the transform palette is going to give you information about the properties of a shape as far as the size goes and a rotation. Okay. Any questions so far, guys? Anything to repeat? I've got two more things and then we're going to head out to break. Now, some of you may have seen this little bar floating around. Anyone's had this on their screen? Okay. How did we feel about that? Was it useful? Was it in the way sometimes? It's a bit of a mixed element. Now, it is important that you know what this is. This is referred to as a contextual task bar. That is the name for it in the window menu. If you guys don't want to have this on screen for any software, you can come to the window menu and you can click on that to turn it off, because sometimes it can get in the way of what you're working with. But essentially, what this little panel is it kind of, whatever you have selected, it provides quick access to elements that you can edit and apply to that shape. So if I had a regular shape selected, for example, I will see quick access options of effects and features that I can use on that shape. If I had an image active, it would give me effects that I can only add to images. So a contextual bar is just offering you a quick way to be able to edit certain properties of that shape. That is what it is for. So that is a contextual bar. So those are some main areas for you guys to focus on. Make sure you know your basics like select same, right? Be familiar with select same, global edit and the difference for that. Be familiar with the appearance palette and what it's for, what options you get to edit in there. Transform palette that gives you information about the width and height of a shape. Go over some of your shortcuts again as well with regards to shift for proportion. What happens if you hold down the option key while you're scaling a shape? Yeah, it scales from the center. So option and alt, that's both the same key. It scales from the center. Be familiar with how your repeats work. So your object radial repeat. And also, it's very important that you are familiar with how your power transforms work as well. So your power transforms refers to the numerical options that we were looking at for rotation and scale when we were doing your star graphic as part of your logo. So be aware of how these elements work as well. So if you get a question For example, where it asks you, how do you rotate a particular shape around another object? And the answers are either a repeat option, so either I use a radial repeat, or I have to use the rotation tool. So any question that you get, you look at the answers. So for something like this, if the question was, how do I repeat an object around the center of another on the page? Either use radial repeat for this. If that is not part of the answers, then your second option is to use the rotate tool. The rotate tool for any of this, when you click on it, by default, the point of rotation is in the center of the shape. But I want it to rotate around the circle. So the trick here is, how do I move this tag to a new destination to then have that be the point of rotation? I hold down the Alt key. So I have the petal selected because that's what needs to rotate. By default, with the rotation tool active, it sits in the center of that shape, but I want it to rotate around the circle. So as Shreya said, hold down the Option key, click on the new point at which it will rotate around. So I'm moving my cursor to the center of the circle. That will change where the tag sits, but it'll also open up your settings. So now if I rotate this, I'm just typing in a random sort of degree. As I rotate, it rotates around the center of the circle and not the center of the petal itself. Those are your two options. Some of it can be done using a repeat. Others require you to use the specific transform tool, rotate or scale. And if you need to change the direction that this is rotating around or scaling towards, you hold down the Option key and you click on that new direction. That will open up the setting and also set the tag. The only reason or the only way you would get this wrong is if the wrong shape is selected. The piece that needs to duplicate, that's what you need to select. Okay, any questions about that to repeat? All right, so a lot of things have alternate options to it. I do suggest that you guys read your questions very carefully and look at the options that are provided. All right, and then that's pretty much it. So your basics of shapes, Pathfinder, colors, and so on. Document setup is very important. Make sure you look at text wrap, how to work with text, and then you guys should be fine for Monday. Okay, and 3D as well. I do suggest that you focus on that little part if you have found a bit of trouble with it, specifically the revolve option. All right, so that is going to be basically just your bit of revision and a bit of prep for your test. Those are just some areas that I picked up that we might struggle a bit, but the rest of it is your general knowledge with regards to Illustrator. So make sure you guys read through your transcripts, practice parts of your logos again, and you guys should be fine for that on Monday. All right, so it's not open book, so you are going to need to do a bit of studying. Okay, so that's revision. Let's go ahead and take our break. When we come back, I will brief you guys on your assignment, and then you guys will have the rest of the lesson to continue on your exercises. Okay, so I'll see you guys after that break.
No, brand development. I think it's
All right, guys. Hello. So on your tables, guys, please, I am speaking. On your tables, I've given you guys your assignments for Illustrator, so everyone should have a copy of that. This is leading on from your brand guides that you guys just submitted that had your logo inside, your competitor, your customer persona, and all of that. So you guys are done with that now. Same process. If there's any feedback, which we will be giving you guys for the logo side of things, we will communicate that to you. But I don't want you to wait for the feedback. Start with the assignment, and then any feedback you do get, you can then make that change. So you guys can continue with that. And like I said, if there's anything that I want to chat to you about with regarding your logos and your designs, then we will go through that together. Now, your Illustrator assignment is now taking all of the work that you've done so far with understanding your purpose, vision, mission, and so on, and now latest your logo, and actually going and digitizing that. So you're not getting any fillable PDF forms to fill out. You guys are now making the design side of things. So this is what your Illustrator assignment is about. You are creating a brand identity, which is something we chatted about when we were talking about branding. Now, a brand identity can also be referred to as a brand identity guide. And what that is, essentially, is when, for example, you go and work for a specific company, like Mr. Price. or you go and work for Standard Bank, for example, as the graphic designer, of course, not the accountant, as the graphic designer. Whatever you are designing, you need to know what type of fonts does this brand use. You need to know what types of colors do Standard Bank use? How do they mix their blue shade? What particular font are they using throughout their adverts? You get that from something called a brand guide. A guide is essentially like a little booklet that shows every sort of visual identity of the business, what the logo looks like. It talks about what the colors are in the company, what the fonts are in the company, and where they are used. That is what a brand identity guide is. It's not something that the public is seeing, the general public. This is more for internal use on how to correctly make products and advertising that stays consistent with the brand. So that is what a brand identity guide is. And that is what you guys will be creating for the brand that you have now picked. So you've already done a logo development, which you will get some feedback on, but you continue developing that as you move on. Now it's time to actually figure out, what does your brand look like? What colors are you associating with your brand? What fonts are you using in your packaging, on your designs, in your logos? We need to figure that out so that anything that you make moving forward with the assignments stays consistent. Your colors shouldn't be changing. Your fonts shouldn't be randomly changing. The entire theme and personality is decided and created at the brand guide so that you have something consistent to go with for the rest of the year. So that is what this assignment is about. Now figuring out, what is the visual aspect of your brand and how does that look? So all of your assignments, it does say here in your brief, are going to revolve around this. So make sure that we are sure in our color scheme, in our fonts, and the personality and theme that you are going for your brand. Refer to your design thinking process before you begin. So plan your things out, draft it, gather some inspiration. That's what we mean by there. Now, your assignment is broken down into 3 parts. So your brand identity has 3 parts. Part number 1 is to evolve and digitize that logo that you created in Illustrator. Now, some of us were making it in Illustrator already, and that's what you submitted for the brand Bible. That's fine. You continue to evolve that. If you sketched yours out, you now digitize that using the tools that you've learned in the software to create that logo. So we are looking for the neat version of this, the cleaned up version. That's your part 1, to evolve and digitize that logo in Illustrator. Part 2 is to then take that exact logo that you created and incorporate it into 3 elements. One of them being a business card. So that is compulsory, a business card design, which we did do together. A second element is a letterhead. So that is also compulsory. And your third element is of your choice. So sometimes students will do a t-shirt mock-up, they'll do a cap, they'll do a cup, they'll do perhaps a vehicle mock-up, which is just putting text onto an image. That third element is of your choice. So this part C is referred to, not part C, part 2 is referred to as something called brand stationery. Brand stationery is physical elements that you give out to your customers, like business cards and letterheads. So you are physically designing what visual aspects are you going to be sharing with people. What does your business card look like? What does the letterhead look like? What does your t-shirt look like if you're making one? If you're using vehicles, what does that look like with the branding? That is what part 2 is speaking about. So your logo and business stationery, which is A, B, and C, must all be done in Illustrator. Then you are to take all of the work that you've just done in points 1 and 2 and incorporate it into an InDesign document. Now, we'll chat about what that InDesign document is for. But any questions about points 1 and 2? So what students sometimes do is they create an Illustrator file for each. Some choose to have a single Illustrator file for their logo design, where they'll maybe show the development of it, or they'll just go straight into creating the logo. Then another Illustrator file for the business card, another Illustrator file for the letterhead, another one for the vehicle mockup, whatever your third element is. If you're doing a social media post, that also counts as well. That is how they choose to lay out and do their parts 1 and 2. Some students put them all in the same Illustrator file and have multiple artboards. So that part is up to you guys, but you must just remember that when you are creating your business stationery, like business card and letterhead, you need to think about bleed. This is all things for print. Your logo, you're not doing any bleed for that because all you're doing is creating your logo element. But your business card and your letterhead, that needs to incorporate bleed because that is something that you would eventually print out and actually hand out to people. So keep that in mind. So parts 1 and 2, any questions about that? Okay, now the InDesign document is leading into part 3. So once you have decided on your logo, you have set up your business card and your letterhead and your third element, you are now to take all of those pieces, including a few other elements, and incorporate them into now the brand guide itself, which is going to be a little booklet that you'll be creating. This is to be done in InDesign, and you can set this up on an A4 landscape page. So no guessing, just a straight A4 landscape page. And we've given you a list on what you need to include in this. So a brand guide is a manual of sorts that when any graphic designer looks at it, they will be able to understand what fonts your company uses, what colors you use, and your CMYK breakdown. They'll be able to tell what your business card looks like and how that should be set up. And they'll also be able to see the general theme and style of the brand. So a brand guide is for internal use for designers. In this brand guide, you will need to incorporate your company's how, what, purpose, and so on, the same elements that we've been doing, except this time you need to now lay that out into a proper design. Okay, a proper design that reflects your brand's personality and aesthetic. Also include a logo storyboard. So you can have a page that speaks about your evolution of your logo, where you started and where you ended up, little annotations of what certain parts mean. You are also to create a mood board that reflects the theme and style of your brand, as well as the typography that you feel fits with that style. So that can take on its own page. Don't try and please don't put everything on the same page. You are allowed to use multiple pages in your brand guide. You can have a page for colors, a page for fonts, a page that talks about your how, what, and why, a page for the logo, and a page for a mood board. Split your things up into different sections. So your mood board, and then you add in elements like your brand fonts. So you will literally have a page dedicated to the main fonts in your brand. How many fonts should you be using? No more than 3. Okay, and the fonts that you've decided on, you must use them throughout your designs, okay, throughout your brand guide. So that page will talk about the fonts that you wanted to use and perhaps a bit on why. That is up to you. Colors. So I'm expecting a color breakdown of your brand colors. So you shouldn't be using 30 colors or 10 colors. You keep that into like 3 or 2. It depends. You also want to include the CMYK breakdown. This is a literal guide that someone can use to design elements for your brand. It tells them what you need to incorporate. Any other graphics that you guys have created along the way? Some students like to make little patterns, or they like to make little decals that they can use on their business cards. That's not the logo, but something that relates to the brand. The graphics is optional, as well as the general feel and story of the brand. You also include your logo, your final logo, and your tagline that you created, as well as your business stationery. So after you've made your a business card, your letterhead, and your third element, you take that and you now add it into your InDesign document. You export that as a PDF, export it as an image, and you put it in your InDesign file. This is now for showcasing purposes. And what you can also include is variations of your logos. If you want to include variations on how it should be used, maybe you've got a black and white version, or if you want to maybe include how it shouldn't be used, like it shouldn't be at this particular size, it shouldn't be in this particular color. That part there is up to you. So that's what we mean by variations. So your brand guide, that's your part 3 in InDesign, is basically incorporating everything that you guys have done, from planning out your vision and your mission to your logo design and even your business stationery, except now this is not an interactive PDF that you're filling in. You're physically designing the layout of every page and styling that to fit your brand personality. Okay, any questions about this part? I will show you guys examples, of course, of past students and what they have done. But those are your 3 points to this assignment. Take into consideration when it comes to your design for anything, business stationery and brand guide included, the use of white space, appropriate use of fonts and color. Please make sure your colors match the personality of your brand. Make sure your fonts match the personality of your brand as well. If you are doing active wear for the gym, don't use a script font. That's not going to match the target and it's not going to match the theme and personality. Those are some considerations that you guys need to take. Do not include your customer persona. So you do not need to include this in your brand guide. Don't include a competitor analysis and don't include the target audience. Although you are taking aspects from your brand Bible that you just made, the only thing you are not bringing across is customer persona, competitor analysis, and target audience. That is not to be included in the brand guide. But your logos is what you'll pull across. Okay, as far as submissions go, we need an Illustrator package of that Illustrator file where you created your logo. So part 1, we need that Illustrator file. Part 2, we need your open Illustrator files for your business card, your letterhead, and your third element of your choice. I am going to be going into those files and I'm going to be looking for things like the use of bleed to see if you custom made your colors. Nobody should be using default colors for their brand, and you should definitely not be using default fonts. So I don't want to see fonts like Minion Pro, Arial, Myriad, or Times New Roman. Those are all default fonts. You guys have access to Adobe Cloud fonts. Use them. Go onto the website. Look at the styles. Make use of them for your brand. So we want to see all of that in your open files. For your part 3, which is your InDesign file, you can just give me the PDF. I do not need the open InDesign file for part 3. I just want the exported PDF format. Okay, so does that make sense to you guys? Your assignment for Illustrator? This is all due on the 17th of April. Okay, now this is on your Learn portal. Examples of brand guides are also on your Learn portal. But to show you guys what past students have done, this is over the years, and it's not perfect. There are areas that definitely need some tweaking, but these are good starting points for you guys. So this one is called Chef's Harvest. Some context behind the brand, they do organic food. So a very similar personality to Woolworths. And this is their brand guide. So what they would have laid out and created in InDesign. So they did a little bit of a cover page. Then they laid out, they laid out their typography. And I want you to take note of the style and the aesthetic and the consistent use of typography. They've made sure that besides telling me the fonts that they are using for the brand, they have also used it in the setup of the document itself. So everything is for the brand. Your brand guide is for your brand. So the fonts that you've decided, you need to use them. The colors that you've decided, they need to make an appearance throughout the brand guide as well. So if your colors are pink and purple, your brand guide setup should not be green and red. You need to use your pink and purple because it's for your brand. So this is their typography layout. Again, how they chose to show me the fonts that they've used, the name of it, and a bit of a demo on what it looks like. This person in particular chose to have a little bit of a description as to why they chose that font and what type of personality it gave off. But also very important is to look at the design of this. There's a lot of white space. It's very clean to the eye. It's very minimal, which is exactly what their brand was about. It was being a very clean and minimal brand for organic food. It wasn't overly busy and kind of in your face and loud. It was quite sophisticated. And then any space, they kind of just fold that up with a custom graphic that they made. So that's their typography. Then they laid out their story and their mission. This person forgot about the vision and so on, but that is something you guys need to include. So again, consistent use of white space, consistent use of font. Your fonts should not be changing per page. The size of it and the look of it should not be changing per page. You need to keep that consistent. It's very obvious when things are misalignment and the formatting is different. This is their mood board that they created. So they specified the type of kind of feeling and mood that they are wanting the brand to give you, which is, of course, a lot of greens, a lot of browns as well, healthy drinks. They made sure to include a farm here to show you that things were fresh and organically grown. Again, this is just trying to capture the feeling and the style of the brand through a set of images. If you want to include the typography and the fonts in here, you can add that in as well. Then their logo. So this was their logo presentation where they gave us the colored version and they also showed us the black and white version as well. And underneath that, they gave you the color breakdown. So when you are adding your colors to your brand guide, however you choose to show that, make sure you've got a swatch of it and the breakdown as well. Be a bit creative with how you choose to show your swatches, okay? Don't, if possible, try not to just go with a straight circle or rectangle. If your company is dealing with something specific that has a specific shape, like jewelry, for example, nothing's stopping you from drawing a little earring and using that to hold your color, to showcase your swatches. That's what we mean by being a bit creative. Or having your logo with each of your different colors. Then this is one of their third elements of their choice. This done in Illustrator. It's a flat image with a flat piece of text on top. There is no Photoshop work here. There's nothing special about this. It's a flat image with text and shapes on top. We also showed you guys the mock-up feature yesterday in AI. You can use that. You can make use of that AI feature to put your logos and your designs on something for your third element. She also did a little social media layout. You can kind of tell that she got a lot of inspiration from Woolworths in that sense. Not the same fonts, but the same idea of just a large image calling attention and then a small piece of text. So you can research other brands, get some ideas from them as well. This is also a third element. So this person did quite a bit. They didn't stop at just 3 things. They went above and they carried on making some more. So you guys are not limited to only doing a business card, a letterhead, and a third element. If you want to get a little bit more creative and add in more branded stuff, you can do that. Because sometimes people tend to kind of get locked in and just want to create more designs. You can add that. You're not limited to just what we've asked for. As long as you've got what we asked, then you're free to add more elements to this. So she kind of went a little bit crazier with the van. She did a bag as well. She even did a website layout. She was quite thorough with all of her branded elements. She did an app page as well, a t-shirt. And then finally, she did her business card. Now your business card, this one is not the best in terms of the amount of text on here and the way it's formatted, which is why I went through business card making with you guys and considerations and things to look out for. So do some research before you start making your business stationery. See what designs are out there and where you can draw inspiration and try and now incorporate that into your design. Of course, make sure it matches the personality and the theme of your company. If your company is very tech-based, then use colors and fonts that are commonly associated with technology. Don't use something that's bright and colorful that targets children. That's what we mean by understanding your personality. So go and do research on colors that are associated with those types of brands and products, the types of fonts and the styles. But this is an example of the InDesign brand identity guide that's incorporating all of those pieces. So we have a few others here, mainly for the layout design, so you can get some inspiration. Some students went above and went and did actual mock-ups of their business stationery. You are not required to do that. If you want to, and you want to do a bit of research on how someone possibly did that, you are welcome to. But you are not required to do realistic mock-ups of your business stationery. Later on, when you learn Photoshop, you can come back and remake these parts and put them on Behance. But right now, for Illustrator, you can make use of the mock-up feature, but it is not something that is required of you. All right, so this was the stationery. And the rest of this document is here for more ideas on the actual layout of that business stationery, to give you guys some guidance and see what past students have done when it came to their business card designs, their letterheads. The student did an envelope design instead. So that's what the rest of the document speaks about. It's 47 pages of different submissions, not one guide. This is also a nice one for you guys to kind of look at, Deja Brew. This was a whole coffee company, because this is more up the alley of what you guys would be able to create quite comfortably on your own in terms of layout, breaking down your logo, sort of telling me a bit about where each aspect came from, using your color variations and your color breakdown as well, your fonts, your incorrect interpretations of the logo. So she told us how not to use it, but I'm sure you can see as I go through this Deja Brew, the consistency in the use of fonts, the consistency in the layout and the style. Because this is a brand guide, it needs to make use of all of those elements that I've decided upon. She's got her business card as well, laid out front and back, her email signature, and her letterhead. A letterhead is literally an A4 design of a page that you would send letters out using. That's what it's for. So that is what you are designing. You know, like how some companies have branded notepads? This is the same concept. So your size for this would be an A4 page. Your business card, what's a business card size? 90 by 50. Please do not give me A5 business cards and A4s. 90 by 50. All right. And then she did a few more other designs as well. And there's other examples for you guys to have a look at. Cool. And just see how people have laid out certain aspects of their designs, their boards, the logo storyboard. She actually went through a whole stage and process until she got to her final design. Her brand elements. So she told me what fonts she was using and where. Her colors as well, she broke them down, and you can see the interesting way that she's done it. She tried to keep the same bubblegum theme with the use of bubbles. It wasn't just straightforward color and breakdown. She incorporated that into the design. So everything should fit together like a puzzle piece. Your brand guide should not look like something that you can design in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs. Make use of the customization and the freedom that you have to layer elements, to have consistent headings and placement of things and colors. So just keep that in mind as you guys are creating. And then she did her variations of the colors that she could use for this logo. All right. Any clarity that you guys need? So your brand that has now just been words in a document, you are creating the visual aspect from it. The fonts, your colors, the entire personality. This is something you'll carry on through the rest of your assignments. So if you need to eventually design packaging, you will refer back to your brand guide on the types of colors that you said your brand needs to use. You'll refer to the type of font that you've decided your brand needs to use. And then you'll be able to know how you should style the rest of your assignments. because most of them are to create aspects for your brand, create packaging for your brand, create a mobile app for your brand. This is what you're going to use this guide for later on down the line. Okay. All right. So all of this is due on the 17th of April. Okay, the copy is on the Learn portal. An example, the same file that I showed you guys now, that is also available as well for you to reference. If you have any questions, you want to get some feedback, again, make use of your mentorship groups, send through your ideas, just as how you guys have been doing so far. I don't need to only see the assignment when it's due. Okay, I can see it before that and provide you guys with assistance. Raymond? What's the minimum amount of pages? I've seen students do about 10, maybe 12. Don't give me 30 pages now, okay? Okay. If you want to do 30 pages, keep that for your Behance. All right, because your main marks are coming from your parts 1 and 2 for your stationery setup, and then the rest of it comes from the aesthetic of your brand guide, and if you have incorporated the elements that we have asked you for. So anything extra that you do, you're not going to get marks for the extra pieces, but I'm not limiting you to not being able to do it, because this again is a portfolio piece that you guys can put up onto Behance. Okay, so maybe try and keep that to like at least 15 or 10. I wouldn't go higher than that. Okay, anything else? All right, so that's it from me for today. You guys have the rest of the session to complete your activities, logo exercises, Vector City, as well as Keyline Party. The submission area has been open for you guys, so you can start submitting from today. Whatever you are done with, don't hold on to it. Just kind of submit that and get it over and done with. Your submission areas are open for logo exercises, pages 1 and 2, your Vector City, Keyline Party, and then the rest of your logo page exercises. The due date is set for next week, Tuesday. So you have from now until then. You just give me the PDF. I don't need the Illustrator file. You can export a PDF, and that is what you can submit on the Learn portal. All right, but that's it from me for today. So you guys continue. If you need any help, just let me know and I will assist. 12 o'clock, guys. So you're welcome to pack up for the day. If you're staying behind, that's fine. Lab is open for you to use.